good morning or good evening, depending on where you are joining us today across the globe. We want to welcome and thank you all, our partners, our guests, and the media for being a part of this launch. Special thanks to the First Lady of Ekiti State, Nigeria, Her Excellency Erelubisi Adeleye Fayemi, for joining us too. Before we start, I would like to share a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this session will be recorded and live streamed on AWDF's YouTube channel. The link to that will be posted in the chat shortly. Kindly ensure that all your microphones are muted and cameras are off during the session. We have French translation available, so please, for our French speakers, do not panic, this will be translated. You just need to go to the channel for interpretation and select either English or French, depending on what language you would like to hear. If you have a question, please put it into the chat box and we will, into the Q&A chat box, and we will ensure that this gets to the relevant panelists. We all know that technology can be fickle. So if at any point in time the connections become unstable, please be patient with us as we work to resolve this accordingly. Well, hopefully, we will have a smooth run. It's just 1 hour and we want to have a great time with you today. As we go on, please share on your social media pages and handles the hashtags. It will come up in the chat, Twitter at Ford Foundation, at Osiwa1, at AWDF01, and Facebook at Ford Foundation, at Osiwa1, at African Women's Development Fund, with the hashtags Kasa, Speak Out Against Sexual Violence, and End Sexual Violence. Once again, welcome and thank you. Please, if you have any questions, put it into the chat and tag everyone, not specific speakers. That way we can ensure that we address your question and facilitate it to the relevant panelists. We are here today, as you all know, to witness the beginning of a remarkable journey in our quest to address sexual violence in West Africa. I would like to think that everyone who has joined us this afternoon for this webinar is concerned and willing to do something about ending sexual violence in one form or the other. That's why the Ford Foundation Open Society Initiative for West Africa and the African Women's Development Fund are partnering to address and reduce sexual violence and its deep-rooted drivers across West Africa, with a focus on Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. Together, we are launching today CASA, a 3.75 million initiative that will a growing focus on sexual and gender-based violence in the region and boost feminist action and advocacy to reduce it. As one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world, sexual violence undermines the health, the dignity, security, and autonomy of women and girls, and the COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated this. Once again, I would like to thank you for joining us for the launch and to hear more about how CASA will support women and girls affected by or at risk of sexual violence to shape more positive attitudes and behaviors towards women's bodily integrity, and then what we all can do. Without much ado, I would like to call on our first speaker, Ponso Mafete. Ponso is the Director of Programs at the African Women's Development Fund, and she will be telling us more about CASA. Welcome, Ponso. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Funke. And I am delighted to be here today to share with you what for us is the culmination of what's already been a great deal of work, of thought, and partnership that has brought us along the journey to this launch day. Just to speak a bit more about what Funke shared about the context, is that as we know, during 2020 and the onset of the COVID pandemic, there were significant increases to the already high prevalence rate of sexual and gender-based violence, particularly as the lockdown measures heightened women and girls' exposure to violence. And through that, even as public narratives about domestic and other types of violence have had increased resonance, for whatever reason, sexual violence still remains a taboo subject. But yet sexual violence and rape don't happen in a vacuum. We see them as part of a continuum of gender-based violence that is allowed and meted out on women through harmful social and cultural norms which are embedded in society. And we believe that stereotypical gender norms and practices endorsed by patriarchy remain at the root of it. And though there is work already in this area, various actors, whether they're legislators, law enforcement, religious bodies, the media, and gatekeepers of culture, have not taken their role as guarantors of the rights of women and girls and minorities seriously. But despite this, women and girls have always and continue to be at the forefront of action to highlight, address, and end sexual violence. And for us, and in this partnership, it's vital to centre those voices in the planning, the design, and decision-making on the services and solutions to address and end sexual violence at the community, national, and regional level. And it's within this context that the Ford Foundation, Open Society Initiative for West Africa, and the African Women's Development Fund have come together under Kasa, specifically to address and reduce sexual violence and its deep-rooted drivers across Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal. And we chose the name Kasa specifically because in the Ghanaian language Twi, it means speak out. The initiative is an ambitious agenda to leverage this growing focus on sexual violence in the region in a holistic way over a multi-year initiative. And the goal of the CASA initiative is to see a reduction in the prevalence of sexual violence, improved responses and collaboration between stakeholders, improved citizen awareness on sexual violence, positive attitudes towards women and girls, and improved support mechanisms for survivors by all stakeholders. And the work under the initiative will take three forms. One is grant making and support to national, regional, and local women-led and feminist organizations, to first responders and institutions who are focused on the critical areas of prevention, accountability, and support services. Secondly, advocacy and campaigning, and the launch of a public campaign that will use new, traditional, and creative media and generate data and evidence to use for advocacy purposes. And finally, collaboration with regional and international development partners and government institutions to scale up interventions on prevention, on advocacy and support, all towards the creation of a sexual and gender-based violence support fund. We at the African Women's Development Fund are really excited about the partnership with Ford and Osiwa and the real potential of women-led and feminist organizations across countries coming together to learn, to push for, and to speak out against sexual violence. And to close, I will quote the Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai, who said, "African women need to see the way they are as a strength and be liberated from fear and from silence." Thank you, Funke. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Bonso, for that context setting. We will now show a short video about CASA. Enjoy.
May, June 2020, a thick cloud cloaked around Nigeria. A group of men brutally raped and killed a 22-year-old student of Uniben at the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Benin, in Nigeria. Within 2 weeks, another group also raped and killed 2 young women in Ibadan, Nigeria. These incidents did not only leave their families shattered, but added to the shocking number of rape cases in Nigeria. This triggered unprecedented nationwide protests organized by Nigerian feminist activists who called for a state of emergency on rape. Senegal, February 2021. A massage parlor worker accused the popular opposition politician Ousmane Sonko of raping and threatening her. Sonko was arrested in March. Thousands of Senegalese took to the streets to support him, leading to violent protests that left at least 10 people dead. In July 2021, the hashtag Justice for Louise was trending in Senegal as a reminder of the country's failure to deal with sexual violence in Senegal's education system. In Ghana, rape, sexual assault, and domestic violence are significantly underreported, and the police lack capacity to effectively investigate cases, which can take years to reach court. Community leaders sometimes negotiate for rapists to pay compensation to victims' families, but they have come under fire in recent years for not taking the crime seriously enough. Hello. My name is... No, I'm not going to mention it. Yes, it happened to me too. Are you also going to wait till it happens to you or to your loved one? Enough is enough. Maybe you know this. Maybe you don't. But do you know that sexual violence is one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world? Sexual violence undermines the health, dignity, security, and autonomy of its victims. Yet it remains tolerated in many societies and shrouded in a culture of silence. Survivors and victims of sexual violence suffer psychological and emotional harm and sexual and reproductive health consequences, including forced and unwanted pregnancies, unsafe abortions, sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, and even worse, death. The high incidence of sexual violence in our academic institutions increases each day, demonstrated by the recent exposé on sexual coercion by university lecturers in Ghana and Nigeria, where students are forced into sexual relations with threats of failure or promise of good grades. Women and girls' exposure to sexual violence permeates every aspect of their lives, and the consequences have huge costs for them and their communities. This is where Kasa steps in, a bold new initiative by Ford Foundation and Osiwa in partnership with the African Women's Development Fund. Kasa seeks to curb this menace through providing grants and financial support to women-led organizations, advocacy and campaigning, and collaboration, by promoting positive attitudes towards women's bodily integrity and calling out perpetrators of sexual violence. Kasa is supporting feminist action in 3 countries in West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal, to raise awareness of the prevalent and harmful impact of sexual violence, as well as to promote collective action to speak out against it. The rise of sexual violence affects women and girls across West Africa and is a violation of their human rights. Stop sexual violence. Speak out. Kasa.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed watching that. And please note that the French version of the video will be uploaded to the live stream on AWDF's YouTube page for our French-speaking colleagues and friends. Because of time, we are unable to play both versions of the video recording. Please bear with us. It's also in the chat. I'll be going right now to our keynote address. And our keynote speaker is a feminist activist, gender and development specialist, policy advocate, a social sector expert, and writer. She has a BA, an MA in history from the University of Ife, Nigeria, now Obafemi Awolowo University. She also received an MA in gender and society in 1992 from the Middlesex University in the UK. She has a PhD honoris causa in sociology from the Taisolari University of Education, 2014. She served as the director of Akina Mama Wa Africa, an international development organization for African women based in London, United Kingdom, with an African regional office in Kampala, Uganda, from 1991 to 2001. While she was the director of AMW, Akina Mama Wa Africa, she established the African Women's Leadership Institute, a training and networking forum for young African women, which has produced well over 6,000 women leaders across Africa. She co-founded the African Women's Development Fund, the first Africa-wide grant-making foundation for organizations based in Ghana, and served as the first CEO of AWDF from 2001 to 2010. AWDF, our co-host today, has supported thousands of women's rights organizations in 42 African countries with millions of dollars in grants. She is the founder of Above Whispers Media Group and Above Whispers Foundation, specializing in leadership development for women, and she runs an online community called abovewhispers.com. She also recently set up the Rapper Network, an online mentoring and support program for young women. She served as a UN Women Nigeria Senior Advisor and is currently a visiting Senior Research Fellow at the African Leadership Center, King's College, London. She led the campaign in Ekiti to enact a gender-based violence prohibition law as far back as 2011, which was revised in 2019, an Equal Opportunities Bill, an HIV anti-stigma bill, a treatment, care, and protection bill for sexually abused minors. She serves on the executive board of the African Women's Development Fund and also on the governing council of Elizade University, Nigeria. She's currently the chair of the Ekiti State GBV Management Committee, as well as chair of the Ekiti State AIDS Control Agency and chair of the Nigerian Governors' Wives Forum. She is the author of Speaking for Myself, Perspectives on Social, Political, and Feminist Activism in Africa, Speaking Above a Whisper, an autobiography, Loud Whispers, and Where is Your Rapper? Her recent work. She also co-edited Voice, Power, and Soul with Jessica Horn, a compilation of images and stories of African feminists in 2008. It is my pleasure at this point to welcome our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Erelu Bisi Adeleye Fayemi, the First Lady of Ekiti State, Nigeria, and co-founder of the African Women's Development Fund, to speak on the urgency of now. Your Excellency, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that gracious introduction, Funke. I'm really delighted to be here. I thank the Ford Foundation, the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, and the African Women's Development Fund for inviting me to speak at this important event. And I congratulate all of you on launching this game-changing initiative as part of the global 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Like many other people who are on this Zoom call right now, I feel weary. I'm tired. I'm tired of going around saying the same thing over and over again, mostly to the same set of people, logging into Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. And it is very easy to feel tired of doing the same thing over and over because it gets to the point where you ask yourself, what is going to change? And then when I feel tired, I remember that over the next 24 hours, somewhere in Senegal, a young girl is going to be violated by someone she trusts. In the Gambia, a woman is going to be beaten badly because she displeased her husband. In Nigeria, somewhere over the next 24 hours, a family is going to make the choice to marry off their 15-year-old daughter so that they can afford to pay for her brother's education. And somewhere in Mali, a baby girl is going to have her clitoris cut off in the name of culture and tradition. And I'm sure over the next 24 hours, in Ghana, a female student is worrying about how she's going to avoid the demands of one of her female lecturers. The list goes on and on. And that is why we need to keep showing up over and over again. The speakers who went ahead of me have spoken about how the COVID-19 pandemic threw additional focus on the issue of sexual and gender-based violence, particularly sexual violence. And this gave birth to the observation of a pandemic within a pandemic. For those of us in the feminist movement, the global feminist movement, the African feminist movement, and feminists who operate at national levels, we were not surprised by what happened last year. But we were pleased that at last more attention and more political will is being focused on the need to do something now around sexual violence before all our communities descend into spaces where no woman or girl is free. And so as we come together today to launch this very important initiative, I'd like to first of all remind us of some of the gains that we have made in the African women's movement in this area of protecting women from all forms of sexual violence, and how a lot of pressures around us are pushing us to a point where a lot of these gains are being eroded. So for example, some of the gains that we know we've made over the years have been the existence of regional and international frameworks to address gender equality holistically and specifically sexual and gender-based violence. We have also seen more awareness around sexual violence issues, mostly as a result of the emergence of social media and the amazing agency of young women online. We have seen a lot of local resources to address sexual violence being initiated by women's rights organizations, coming forward to be the ones to set up sexual assault referral centers, to set up shelters and safe spaces for women who need them in local communities well before government got involved. And another gain I believe that we have made that we should be proud of is we have built a body of knowledge and thought around sexual and gender-based violence. This has been developed by African feminist scholars and practitioners. And so we have very clear roadmaps about why these things happen in our communities, why they continue to be persistent, why impunity continues, and the persistent and continuous role of the African feminist movement at regional, national, and local level to hold the line on all these gains. So as we move forward into this new era that this CASA initiative is going to make available to us, I would like us to remember a number of things. These are lessons that we should be taking away from the gains we have made and from how important it is to hold on to those gains before we lose them. First of all, we need to continue to address the structural and underlying causes of violence against women. Violence against women and girls does not happen in a vacuum. It happens because we allow the consistent permeation of patriarchal norms and values, which undermine the physical and emotional well-being of women and girls throughout their life cycle. And this needs to be addressed. Second, we need to continue to advocate for the provision and implementation of strong legal and policy frameworks. As I've mentioned above, we have seen quite a lot of legislation and policy frameworks around sexual and gender-based violence, but having them on paper is one thing, implementation and enforcement is something else. And we still have significant gaps and challenges in this area. The third lesson I would like us to know to take forward is how we can scale up treatment, care, and protection of survivors of sexual violence. A question that those of us who work in this area get asked is, are the number of those affected by sexual violence increasing in spite of our efforts? Or are more women and girls simply coming forward now because they feel they'll be heard and supported. The truth, I believe, lies somewhere in between. A victim of sexual violence deserves the right to move from being a victim to a survivor. A victim is voiceless and powerless, with no agency. A survivor has a voice, hope, and the power to take control again. A victim becomes a survivor through the quality of support they receive, ranging from prompt medical attention, short to long-term psychosocial support, access to justice, economic empowerment if needed, and patient, compassionate, and experienced champions. This can only be made possible if there are systems and resources in place to attend to these needs. The fourth issue I'd like to mention is education and reorientation for prevention. We have to do whatever we can to stop these cycles of sexual violence by addressing this as a life cycle issue from when girls and boys are young, particularly our boys. And the educational ecosystem in all our countries have to be on board with this. And then there's the issue of synergy of the multisectoral and interagency services that are required to provide these services and to scale them up. In Nigeria, for example, the bodies responsible for coming together to provide oversight and coordination around gender-based violence responses are known as coordinating mechanisms. They are supposed to include a range of actors, the police, the ministries of justice, of health, of education, information, women affairs, civil society organizations, academics, religious leaders, traditional leaders, a whole range of stakeholders. It's important for this synergy to be there to ensure that the work we are doing does not continue to slide because one key stakeholder is missing from the table. And last but not least, we have the critical importance of community engagement. All our best intentions will amount to nothing if communities do not own the issue of sexual violence. So we have to make the necessary investments in sensitization and awareness raising to make everyone a stakeholder in this issue. Traditional rulers, religious bodies, political leaders, community associations, male champions are all key to this. And so all these issues I've mentioned need significant financial resources to make the strategies work. The Ford Foundation, who initiated this CASA fund, has always been known for its innovative and path-breaking leadership in social change philanthropy, particularly as it affects social movements and their unique needs. And I believe I'm in a position to say this because I have worked with the Ford Foundation in many capacities for at least the past 20 years now, if not much longer. With this CASA initiative, with Ford Foundation running this CASA initiative alongside OSIWA, another kindred spirit, and the African Women's Development Fund, African feminists can take ownership of the violence against women agenda and keep up the momentum for change. When the African Women's Development Fund was established in 2000, the objective was to build an African feminist philanthropic institution grounded in the values and principles of the African feminist movement. Over the past 21 years, AWDF has stayed true to this vision. And by the way, many thought that this was impossible at the time. But AWDF has consistently demonstrated the capacity to invest in all the ways that matter in feminist movement building and in women's feminist leadership. The Ford Foundation and OSIWA could therefore not have found a better home for this initiative. And I know that AWDF will deliver way and beyond expectations. Sexual and gender-based violence is a terrible scourge. Every victim deserves to be called a survivor. We all have a voice, no matter how small. Let us use our voices to create a mighty sound. Ford Foundation, OSIWA, and AWDF have come together with their own voice, which is money on the table. We all have a platform. Let us use whatever leverage we have to, according to the theme of this year's 16 Days of Activism, orange the world and end violence against women now. Kasa, congratulations.
Thank you very much for that call to action, Your Excellency. We couldn't have gotten a better person to help call out CASA like you did. I don't even think I did that at the beginning. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for always walking the talk and standing with us on this. We will now take a few questions from our participants. Your Excellency, we hope that you're still here with us in case we have questions for you. We'll take a few questions from our participants from the chat and also post some of the frequently asked questions about CASA to our next speakers. To do justice to that, I'll be calling on my colleagues, Beatrice Yedom and Nikang Longjan. Beatrice is the grants manager at the African Women Development Fund, Ghana, and Nikang is the program coordinator managing the Equality, Justice, and Human Rights Program of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, Nigeria office. The first question I'm going to be asking will go to Beatrice, and the question is, how were the grantees selected? Beatrice, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Funke, and good afternoon to everybody from Accra. And so the African Women's Development Fund has a well-developed approach to its grant making. And for this particular CASA round of grants, what we did was to do some engagements with our partners and women's rights organizations in the 3 countries, which is Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. Being the first round, we thought that it was important that we worked with some very key organizations. And so we went into these countries, engaged with our partners, and we got a list of key organizations who were working on sexual violence. We then looked at this, these lists that we got, bearing in mind that this is a 5-year plan and that this is just the first round. We chose 14 of these organizations. We invited them to apply for the grants, and 12 of them were selected or approved by the AWDF board. This is just the beginning. We have 4 more years, so 4 more year grants of grants to go. And so we would have a better chance to engage more women's rights organizations on the continent. But to say that this grant went to some partners that through our engagement with partners in the 3 countries, we were able to engage to apply for the grants. And these are women-led organizations, mostly small women's rights organizations.
Thank you, Beatrice. I have a second question for you, and that is, does each grantee focus on a different implementation program area to cover the spectrum of violence against women? When Ponso was introducing CASA, she mentioned a few of those. So the grantees that you've selected, they all focus on a different spectrum of violence against women?
So for this round, our strategy was to work with organizations, one, who were providing direct service to survivors because of the urgency of the issue, as well as organizations who were creating awareness around the issue of sexual violence and the need to prevent it. And we're working with small organizations who are working in communities outside the urban areas. This is because we think that those areas do not have as much resource as the urban areas. So for beginners, we started with these organizations, those providing direct service and those creating awareness. Moving forward, we'll be looking at the other areas. Again, like Ponto said, we have other segments of this CASA project. We have the advocacy part, we have the data and evidence part, and so it's all come together to provide us with a comprehensive whole. But for this round, we looked at those providing direct service to survivors.
Before I let you go for now, Beatrice, so how will impact be measured, for CASA? What does success look like?
Okay, great. So AWDF has a well-defined monitoring, evaluation, and learning and strategy. We are going to use the same strategy. But for this specifically, we'll be looking at the strategy around using the outcome harvesting, because we want to be able to get some key outcomes from this project, as well as significant stories. So we'll be looking at, even though it's to be a range of projects that will be funding, we will be highlighting those significant stories that will be coming out of these projects that we are supporting. We want to be able to tell the story and tell it in a concrete way.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. I'll let you rest for a bit. And Mikang, outside of funding, I would like to ask you this question, because you work for CIWA and you're one of the partners funding Kasa. Outside of funding, what are the biggest barriers to ending violence against women that you can highlight? One or two. Mikang, are you here?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Funke, for that. Welcome everyone to this. Yes, outside of what you said, Funke, in terms of barriers, there's so many barriers that we have. If you look at the patriarchy system that we have, it's been a huge challenge for women and girls in this side of the world. So that has been one key challenge we've had. If you look at the social cultural norms and practices, that has also taken a big turn for the worse. And then if you also look at the intimate partner violence that is still ravaging, rape, sexual cohesion, child sexual abuses, genital mutilation, forced marriages. So all these social cultural norms have also helped to increase some of the barriers we face. And then even if you look at the legal frameworks we have them, but they're not being implemented. Implementation seems to be a key challenge we have. For instance, in Nigeria, with the VAP Act that was passed, only 22 states so far have passed it. For 7, the bill is before the National Assembly, while we still have 7 states yet to pass that. So that also is a huge barrier that we also face. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikang. Beatrice, I'll come back to you again before I then move on to Her Excellency on the barriers. There's a question in the chat from Lolo Cynthia, and she's asking, how are we leveraging self-care intervention in sexual and reproductive health rights to combat gender-based violence, like reproductive coercion? I think that's the question. I don't know if that's clear, Beatrice.
Yes, self-care is very critical. Self-care, mental health is very critical when it comes to addressing issues of sexual violence. And so in the project that we are supporting, we are ensuring that the kind of support that these projects are giving to survivors is holistic. And so they are looking at a whole spectrum of the needs of these survivors, including self-care, including mental health, including physical well-being. And so self-care is very, very critical, and we are ensuring that most of the projects that are providing support services do not forget about issues of self-care for women and for mental health. Not only for survivors, but also for actors and activists who are working on this issue as well.
Thank you, Beatrice. Please put the questions in the Q&A. If you put it in the general chat box, it might get lost in traffic. Someone is asking, how will victims be protected against stigmatization? How will victims be protected against stigmatization? I think there are process issues and implementation issues. But Beatrice, you want to give it a shot?
Yes, and so issues of privacy is very, very critical when we are dealing with survivors of violence. And so in the project that we are supporting, we are supporting organizations and projects who have the experience and the expertise in working with survivors. And so these experienced organizations do take into consideration the privacy of survivors. Some of the projects that we have safe houses. Some of them are working with the police. Some of them are working with the community. And so in doing that, they are able to provide the necessary support and privacy and protection to survivors. It is a very, very key component of the support that is provided to survivors, and we are making sure that the projects that we are supporting do not forget about that.
Thank you, Beatrice. Your Excellency, we have a question from Blessing Duru, and she wants to know, she says, thank you, Your Excellency, for setting the context. Please, Ma, I would like to know what commitments the Nigerian Governors' Wives Forum have made towards ensuring the domestication of the VAP across all states to address the surge in violence against women and girls. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Funke. And the question, is the question from a Nigerian?
Yes, the question is from a Nigerian, Blessing Duru.
Oh, from Blessing Duru. Oh, okay. Well, Blessing should know, Blessing from Alliances from Africa should know that the Nigerian Governors' Wives Forum have been working since June 2020 on the issue of sexual and gender-based violence in Nigeria. We approached the Nigerian Governors' Forum, our husbands, and demanded that they declare a state of emergency against gender-based violence. Feminist activists around the country had been talking about it before then. I had been talking and writing about it. But in light of the persistent attacks on women, sexual violence attacks on women during the COVID-19 period, we approached the governors and demanded for that state of emergency, which they agreed to on the 10th of June, 2020. Now, at the time that the governors declared the state of emergency, only 14 states in Nigeria had passed the VAP Act. As of November 2021, we have 30 states in Nigeria who have passed the VAP. And if you add the Federal Capital Territory, that makes 31. There are 6 states who have not passed yet, and we are on their case. And for those who have passed the act but have not assented, we have appealed to the governors for them to do so as soon as possible. I have just come from the 2nd annual conference of Nigeria Governors' Wives Forum, annual conference on gender-based violence. We had one last year. That's why I'm dressed in a head tie and, you know, all decked out like this. We reiterated our demands to our husbands today that would like those 6 who have not passed the VAP to do so. Those who have passed but haven't assented should do so. And those who have passed and assented should ensure that there are adequate resources in place for the full implementation of the VAP. And as First Ladies, we have been doing whatever we can in our state to drive these processes in partnership with women's rights organizations. So for example, that's why I'm chair of the Gender-Based Violence Management Committee in Ekiti, the coordinating mechanism for sexual and gender-based violence in the state. And there are at least 8 First Ladies who chair the GBV mechanisms in their states. So we have been doing a lot as the Nigerian Governors' Wives Forum, and will continue to do more.
Thank you, Excellency. And just to say that I was also at the same event, and that's why I'm all decked in orange. Your Excellency, thank you very much. There will be another question for you. I'll come back to that. Dorothy Injemanze wants to know when we can start applying. Beatrice, I think that should be for you and the AWDF team. When can NGOs start applying?
AWDF's next grant-making cycle will be next year around March. And so there will be a call for proposal. Please follow the AWDF social media handles, check our websites, and then you will get the exact time. However, there will be a call which will be widely disseminated. And so women's rights organizations on the continent should hear about it.
Thank you, Beatrice. I'm trying to see whether there are more questions. Please keep the questions coming. Some are currently being answered in the chat. Abiola Akiode is asking, is the responsibility of the state to provide services for her people, including survivors of gender-based violence? Is CASA going to invest in ensuring resource accountability for sustainability? Beatrice Mikang. I think I can answer that, but Beatrice, please go ahead.
Please go ahead. No, it's okay. Funke, go ahead.
Yeah, well, as I will speak as board, yes, we are not the state. And of course, we recognize that it is the responsibility of the state to do that. But we need all hands on deck. Like Her Excellency mentioned, it's not just it's not ending violence against women and girls, and particularly sexual violence will not rest on government alone. Development partners, even the private sector, also need to come on board. So we're going to invest, yes, in legal, policy, regulatory, whatever grantees rights to say this is what they want to focus on. And that's why I'll move this also to Beatrice, because the applications, board is not going to be implementing this, AWDF will. So the applications will come with a myriad of issues, a mixed bag of processes or options of what to do to address this. So Beatrice, please, can you shed more light on that?
So the applications would be, let's say, will be general around sexual and gender-based violence, but we'll be looking at all the issues that would help us prevent and address this. And so from awareness raising, from accountability, from policy engagement, from working with other partners, be it community, be it the private sector, like you said, it will be general. But I also want to say that in addition to the CASA, AWDF itself also support these areas of work. And so AWDF its work would be backing the CASA campaign to ensure that we are able to reach all the segments of things that we need to be able to effectively address issues of sexual and gender-based violence.
Thank you, Beatrice. It seems that you are the most sought after panelist today. We have someone from Ghana, Dr. Koka Apia. She's saying, is the grant for only organizations working specifically on sexual violence, or others working on SGBV generally can also apply?
Generally, the grants will be for women's rights organizations working on sexual and gender-based violence, but our priority will be those who work on sexual violence, because in our mind's eye, they have the experience, the expertise, and the coverage to be able to work on this effectively. But generally, all organizations working on sexual and gender-based violence do qualify, but we'll be prioritizing those who have the experience in working on sexual violence issues.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Did you want to add up?
Yes, sorry, just to add just to stress the point, is that we recognize that sexual violence is one type of gender-based violence. What we want to do through CASA is to focus on sexual violence so we can really understand the approaches, the type of support, and particularly support advocacy that works to change norms and attitudes towards sexual violence. Because we believe that if attitudes to women change and their bodily integrity is respected, that it will positively impact on all types of gender-based violence. So while CASA focuses on sexual violence, AWDF's programming under body health and rights focuses on broader types of violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Ponso. I would like to call on Her Excellency for this last question. Again, from Abiola Akyode, which is asking about the responsibility of the state to provide services. I know that you would like to respond to that. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Funke. Yes, absolutely. The state has the responsibility to its citizens. And as someone who has been a part of the feminist movement for so many years and worked solely in women's rights organizations, sometimes I find it a bit strange to be on the other side and to be reminded of all these obligations. And so, yes, the state does have responsibility to provide laws and legal frameworks that protect citizens, to ensure that citizens can access justice when it is required, and to ensure that there are systems in place for accountability of all duty bearers. And this is where the role of women's rights organizations comes in. And there still needs to be a lot of advocacy to be able to hold governments accountable. For example, we keep talking about the provision of services such as sexual assault referral centers or shelters. In Nigeria, we have roughly, at the moment, we have roughly 30 sexual assault referral centers in 18 states in Nigeria, which means there are 18 states that don't have sexual assault referral centers. Some states have multiple SAC centers, but there are 18 states where there are none. And our governments, our state governments, should not be waiting for donor partners to come and establish these resources for them. Our state government should take responsibility and protect their citizens. In Ekiti State, for example, the Sexual Assault Referral Center that we established last year, that we built from scratch, the Morimi Clinic, it was not done with donor resources. It is the state government that provided the resources. And so our governments, owe it to us to do those things. And then it's also important for us to continue to work in partnership wherever that is possible with government officials, with first ladies, where that's possible, with the attorney generals, with the women's, commissioners, and so on. Without this synergy and without these partnerships, our work is going to be all that more difficult. But from the platform I occupy right now, I recognize the importance and I'll keep pushing for it.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, Beatrice and Mikang, for your candid responses to the questions. And thanks to all those who asked questions, so many questions. We would have a frequently asked questions live on AWDF's website and to be shared. I am sorry, we cannot take more questions. We are almost over time. We have now concluded the Q&A session. However, like I said, please keep the questions coming through the chat, and we will try our best to respond both in English and French. Please note that AWDF will also upload answers to some of the questions we are unable to respond to here as frequently asked questions on their website and social media pages. Finally, I would like to call on our freshly minted Regional Director at the Ford Foundation Office for West Africa, Dr. Catherine Chinedum. I know she prefers me to say Chichi, Aniagolo Okoye for the closing remark. Chichi joined Ford Foundation in September. She would be overseeing all the foundation's grant making in the region and will lead the team to promote human rights, democracy, and social inclusion in West Africa. Chichi has over 20 years of experience leading a variety of country offices in Nigeria for a range of international development organizations. Prior to joining Ford, she was country director of TechnoServe, and she has been served as country director for Oxfam. I see her here on the screen. That tells me she wants me to stop reading the bio. So Chichi, you have the floor for the closing remark.
Thank you so much, Funke, for an excellent gathering. You have done a fantastic job with your team. I'd like to start by thanking Her Excellency, Bisi Adeleye Fayemi, a friend who I have not been in touch with for a while. I must come and visit, who has done amazing work in promoting women's rights and even in the position that she is in, has continued to use her good office to promote women's issues and women's rights. I salute you and thank you for being an amazing voice in the circle and beyond. Thank you. I would also like to thank Osiwa for partnering with us for CASA. There is nothing that makes things so much easier when you have partnerships that believe in what it is that you're doing and are willing to put their money in it. So I thank Osiwa, management, and the team for partnering with us on this journey. AWDF, an amazing organization that for years, and with the vision of BC as a co-founder, Her Excellency, and all the others who at a time when it was not so fashionable, believed in the fact that African women could run an organization, put it together, and address African issues. And what is it when about 20 years later, the organization is still here? I really commend you and thank you for the work that you have done. And we believe that there will be transparency, accountability in the management of this fund, and that women's organizations who are working on GBV will be able to get the support that they need for working with you. Our grantees, women activists who have kept the issue at the fore, even sometimes the risk to their own personalities, to their own health, and sometimes even to their own life across West Africa. I salute you and I say thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here. And the victims whose courage have put a face to the statistics and humanized the stories of gender-based violence. I thank you for your courage. I thank you for your tenacity. I thank you for making it possible for gender-based violence to continue to be an issue that will not be ignored and should not be ignored. As a social justice organization, the Ford Foundation recognizes the negative impact on gender-based violence on women and is committed to ending gender-based violence. And so hence CASA, with its focus on sexual violence. But we also see gender as an important cross-cutting issue for all the things that we do. So our work is done through a gender lens, and we continue to promote gender in the things that we do. And we'll continue to see how we can ensure that women have the equality that they deserve in West Africa. CASA, as we have heard, is a great mechanism. And we encourage local NGOs to take advantage of the resources that CASA provides with ambitious proposals that actually have the potential to shift the narrative. Let's push the envelope. Let's not do what's safe and what has been tried and tested. Let's be bold and see and do the things and come up with proposals that will really make a difference in addressing gender-based violence. But we have to recognize, of course, that gender-based violence is not a West Africa problem alone, where this is 16 days of activism. So it's a worldwide issue. And the 2018 analysis of prevalence data conducted by WHO showed that nearly 1 in 3 women, 30% of women, have been subjected to physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner or non-partner sexual violence, or both. If we add other forms of violence that women face, we may find that maybe everybody, or 1 in 2, have experienced violence. Yet gender-based violence is the only crime in which there is a debate on the criminality of it. Some cultures and religions tolerate it, and the law often turns a blind eye. What this tells us is that women alone cannot be made to bear the burden of ending gender-based violence when they are not the major perpetuators. This is why, to address GBV, women groups cannot do it alone. There must be collaboration, as Her Excellency said, with men's groups, religious and cultural institutions, law enforcement, policymakers, and we must have the media keeping this in the fore, constantly making headlines of these stories, because it is only the things that make headlines that people really pay attention to in the end. It also means that we have to work harder to get women into decision-making positions, because that is how women's issues, including GBV, will be brought and kept at the fore. We see how well the presence of Her Excellency in the Governor's Wives Forum has really kept the issue of GBV at the fore. Imagine if she was the governor. We have to do the best we can to get more women in decision-making position. There is a lot to be done, no question. And I am delighted that the Ford Foundation and OSIWA have taken the first bold step, but it is not enough. We're therefore asking all the development partners, local philanthropies, government at various levels, and even communities to also commit to the cause. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Have a wonderful evening and keep the fire burning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gigi. And it's a wrap we have now come to the end of the launch. I would like to say a big thank you to our speakers and guests for your time and interest in CASA as we work towards ending sexual violence in West Africa. As I said at the beginning of the launch, many of us here are clearly concerned, if not alarmed, about the rising incidences of sexual violence all around us. And that's why we're all here. And we all have a role to play for CASA to work. There are many laudable initiatives out there that are addressing one form of sexual and gender-based violence or the other, but CASA is specifically focusing on sexual violence because it is one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world. I would not go ahead and read all the statistics, but our goal is to raise a total of $10 million for CASA within the next 5 years, and Ford and Osiwa have set the ball rolling with a seed fund of $3.75 million. We call on other peer funders, like Chichi has said, to join us to make this happen. Finally, we all have a choice to make and decide where we stand. And I started saying this yesterday at a function, as perpetrators, as enablers, or inhibitors. I hope we'll all choose to inhibit, to undermine, and prevent sexual violence in our circle of influence. Please continue to engage with the conversation on all social media platforms to help popularize CASA using the hashtag CASA, speak out against sexual violence and sexual violence. Thank you very much and good evening.